It was an exciting day. Finally, after months of eyeing this one particular beautiful blue pair of shoes, Rachel was about to lay her hands on them. And how she was going to afford the shoes was by participating in a top-secret psychology study. After going to the store to tell the owner to put the shoes on hold for her, off she went to the study. Once there, she was instructed to meditate and to think of happy and pleasant things. Eager to ensure a successful participation for that $100 payment, she eagerly followed the instructions. As she closed her eyes and relaxed, from behind, something wrapped around her neck, tight.
Well, that's odd.
Report suspicious activities.
It's raining today.
1998. An elfin-featured teen with emerald eyes, Rachel Barber lived to dance and dance to live. A fan of classical music since her early childhood, the 15-year-old full-time dance student was said to be on the fast track to fame. Her family, peers, and anyone who experienced her dance performances said she absolutely possessed the potential not only for a career on stage, but in front of the camera as well. From a young age, she had shown a flair for dancing. According to her parents, she would constantly dance in her bedroom and around her home. After pleading with her parents repeatedly, she was enrolled in dance classes. And even there, her dance teachers saw her potential. Inspired by the teacher's stamp of approval of their daughter's potential, Michael and Elizabeth Barber ripped up the carpet in their home to replace it with vinyl flooring so Rachel could practice her dancing to her heart's content. And she did. She was a committed teenager. Like any tenacious teen hungry to succeed in their desired field, she feared failure. All the time she had outside of school, she would spend on dancing in pursuit of her career on stage and screen. As such, despite possessing a natural intelligence, she struggled with her studies at school. It is said that whenever she wasn't dancing, she was desperately anxious to get back to practice. As such, ever the precocious teenager, she proposed an idea to her parents. She asked them to take her out of her conventional high school to enroll in a special performing arts school, the Dance Factory, in Melbourne's inner-city suburb of Richmond. After some pushback and despite the risk, her parents finally agreed to let her pursue her talents. And so it was. In late 1998, Rachel enrolled in the Dance Factory. There, almost immediately, a fellow student, Emmanuel Corella, caught her eye. The two quickly got into a relationship. So infatuated were they with each other that classmates were soon calling the pair Romeo and Juliet. Little did they know, though, that just like the Shakespearean play, this teenage love affair was bound for tragedy. Enter Caroline Robertson, a wallflower and loner. Just 5 years older than the effervescent Rachel, Caroline was perceived as unfashionable and overweight with a depressed disposition, for which she was ostracized. In a lot of ways, Rachel and Caroline were polar opposites. And what do they say about opposites? They attract. Or at least Caroline was, pulled into Rachel's gravity. The attraction was immediate and strong as she wormed her way into Rachel's world, thanks to her younger sister being school friends with one of Rachel's younger sisters. By acting as friend and big sister to Rachel, Caroline was able to weasel her way into the Barber family's circle of trust. It was through this that she would often babysit the Barber girls. Anything to be in Rachel's orbit. An obsessive loner with manipulative and frightening tendencies, Caroline hid behind a pleasant facade. Like a good predator, she studied and stalked her prey from under camouflage. According to her journals, Rachel was everything that she wasn't, writing about how Rachel was strikingly attractive, with very clear pale skin and hypnotic green eyes, whilst describing herself as a pizza face, with brown oily hair and no coordination. In Caroline's mind, Rachel could have easily been one of those models or entertainers who graced the covers of glossy teen magazines. Rachel, the graceful dancer, seemed to have it all: talent, good looks, and popularity. Everything Caroline lacked. And while Caroline was stuck working a boring desk job with a mobile phone service provider, Rachel's dance and modeling career only blossomed further. Oddly, in chats with her colleagues, It's alleged that she would boast about having friends who were involved in theater and television, perhaps hoping some of the mystique and glamour of the stage and screen would illuminate her dull presence. On one occasion, the infatuated Caroline once even asked Michael and Elizabeth Barber if she could photograph their eldest daughter for a project she was working on. And in the summer of 1999, it is reported that she even asked one of the younger Barber girls for Rachel's birth date and later tried to obtain a copy of her birth certificate. Her obsession had taken a turn. Envy had turned into something else. One way or another, Caroline was going to be Rachel. February 28th, 1999. Caroline made a phone call. Rachel picked up. She had a proposal for Rachel. In that late-night phone call, she told Rachel that she could make $100 by participating in a psychological study the very next day. The 19-year-old told Rachel to come to her apartment after her classes at the dance factory, but she warned the 15-year-old that if she told anyone about the study, she risked compromising the results and thus forfeiting the $100. March 1st, 1999. The following morning, Michael Barber dropped his daughter off at a tram stop. As usual, they agreed to meet back at the tram terminal at 6:15 p.m. before she met up with her friends and boyfriend Manny to head to school together. On the way to school, she let on about how she was going to make a lot of money later that evening. However, when they prodded her on more details, she refused to say anything further. They simply assumed that it was probably a modeling job. It was Rachel after all. At lunchtime, Rachel and Manny headed over to a nearby shopping center to grab lunch. Still curious about her statement earlier that day, Manny asked about the secret job. Again, she steadfastly refused. All she told him was that she was going to meet an old friend who had gotten her the job. But after noticing that Manny was now worried, she assured him that the work itself was harmless and safe. After their lunch, they headed over to a shoe store where she asked the cashier to put on hold a pair of blue shoes she'd been eyeing for a long time, stating that she would buy them the next day. After school finished at around 5 p.m., Rachel waved goodbye to her classmates after making plans to meet them for breakfast the following morning before walking off with her boyfriend to the train station. The teenage couple shared a hug before Rachel promised to call him later. Oddly, she told him that she needed to catch a different tram to go elsewhere to meet her secret friend for the secret job. As he watched his girlfriend walk off to catch a different tram, little did he know that would be the last time he would ever see her. Eventually, Rachel met up with Caroline and the two caught a tram to the latter's apartment. A former dance factory student, riding the same tram that night, later told police that she remembered Rachel looking quite beautiful and striking, in contrast with the other girl, who was plain looking. The two girls stepped off the tram and walked to Caroline's flat. What happened next is not exactly known, but according to Caroline's broken recollections, she enacted her twisted plan once inside. After possibly drugging Rachel with a drowsy powder on pizza slices, they started the study. She told Rachel that they would begin the study by meditating. She instructed her to think about happy and pleasant things. As Rachel relaxed and closed her eyes, Caroline picked up a length of telephone cord and wrapped it around Rachel's neck. According to Caroline, she hesitated for a moment when the, and I quote, veil lifted. But believing she had taken the plan too far to stop at that point, the veil dropped again. And with that, Rachel passed. It is not known if the so-called veil lifted again, but we do know that after the murder, Caroline shoved Rachel's lifeless body into her wardrobe where she laid for several days, telephone cord still wrapped around her neck. 7 p.m. In the Barber family home, Rachel's mother was getting increasingly anxious with no sign of her husband or eldest daughter as she prepared dinner. Finally, about half an hour later, the phone rang. It was her husband. Relieved, she listened to her husband expecting an explanation for their delay. However, this was the start of a nightmare, unfortunately. Flustered, her husband explained that Rachel had not shown up at their usual meeting point outside of the train station. Immediately, Elizabeth called the police department, but they were less than helpful. Their reasoning was that it was probably just Rachel being a rebellious teenager. they assured Elizabeth that Rachel would eventually show up. But knowing their daughter, Michael and Elizabeth were sure that something terrible had happened to her, especially given that in the past, on several occasions, Rachel had been followed home by creepy men. And not to mention that Rachel was also afraid of the dark and would definitely not stay out in the dark on her own without telling anyone. And perhaps most importantly, the main reason the Barbers refused to believe the police's reasoning was that they had always allowed their children to live their lives openly. They allowed Rachel to have a boyfriend and generally encouraged open communication with the family. They sincerely believed that Rachel felt free to talk and confide in them. No way she would, out of the blue, decide to rebel and run away. But of course, sadly, Rachel had indeed hidden something from them this one time. Not satisfied with the police's response, the Barbers started their own investigation. Immediately, they called Manny, who explained that the last he had seen of Rachel was after school. But what truly shocked them was when he told them about the secret job that she had after school. Now armed with a lead, they called everyone they could think of. However, none of her friends or classmates had seen her since school. Left with little options, the Barbers went to the police department and shared with them everything that they had discovered. Yet again, though, despite the Barbers' desperate pleas, the police refused to file a missing persons report or even help them in any way. March 2nd, 1999. Undeterred by the police's inaction, the Barbers took photos of Rachel and went to the streets themselves, asking anyone if they'd seen their daughter. This is when they spoke to Manny again. This time, they were notified of the store where Rachel had put the blue shoes on hold. Immediately, they went to the store hoping to get another lead, only to discover that Rachel had not come in to pay for those shoes. However, there at the store, a store assistant told the Barbers about how there had been a man in the store in the last 2 weeks, trying to recruit girls to work in what he called his entirely legal brothel. Naturally, the Barbers were disturbed by this piece of information, but it was a lead nonetheless, and they were determined to find their missing daughter. With a number given by the shop assistant, they tracked down the brothel. Asking if anyone matching Rachel's description was working there, they were told no. According to the brothel, they never recruited girls off the streets, let alone anyone not of legal age. While the Barbers were relieved, naturally, that also meant that their only lead had led them to yet another dead end. And with law enforcement still refusing to take action, the local community stepped to search for Rachel. March 3rd, 1999. With Rachel's disappearance gaining more publicity in the community, finally the police officially launched their investigation. Right off the bat, they interviewed Manny, Rachel's boyfriend, who had a solid alibi. Despite this, however, their investigation of Manny was not finished yet. They had a new theory, which was that Manny had gotten Rachel pregnant, and that to hide this from her parents, Rachel had ran away. Manny denied this, as did Rachel's parents. It was obvious to the Barbers that the police were still stuck on their initial theory that Rachel had run away, and were now looking for anything to make that theory stick. However, nothing could prepare them for what really happened. March 4th, 1999. A breakthrough. A friend of the Barber family called to relay a new piece of information. Apparently, on the day of her disappearance, she had seen Rachel with another girl on a tram get off at an intersection. Immediately, the police were notified of this new development. And it checked out. When the police reviewed CCTV footage around that intersection, they saw Rachel with an unidentified girl. This was their first solid lead since Rachel's disappearance. The story spread like wildfire across Australia. With a solid lead, the police finally began their investigation in earnest over the following week. They compiled a list of all acquaintances of the Barber family and Rachel and went down the list. At the same time, they began pulling the Barber family's phone records as well. And there, they saw it. 2 curious phone calls to the Barber residence the day prior to Rachel's disappearance. Both of these February 28th calls lasted approximately half an hour each. Who was this caller? It was one Caroline Reed Robertson, the Barber's ex-babysitter. When the police looked into this new suspect, They found out that she had rented an apartment not far from the last place Rachel had been seen alive, at the tram station. Immediately, the police tracked Caroline's workplace and went down to talk to her. However, they were informed that she had called in sick that day. Curiously, her workplace let on that she had also been out sick on March 1st, the same day Rachel had gone missing. According to her boss, she had eventually come back to work on March 2nd, but then again had called in sick for the rest of the week with the flu. March 12, 1999. With suspicions further increasing, the police decided to go to Caroline's apartment, but instead of speaking directly to Caroline, they interviewed her neighbors first. More than one of them reported hearing loud sobbing coming from Caroline's apartment on the night of March 2nd. Oddly, they described the sobbing as sounding similar to a toddler having a tantrum. Finally, detectives went to Caroline's apartment, but when they entered it, they found her unconscious on her bedroom floor. Allegedly, she had suffered from epilepsy and had experienced a seizure, likely brought on by the stress of the murder and its aftermath. In another room, police found a bag containing some of Rachel's clothes, journals, and an application for a Victorian birth certificate in the name of Rachel Elizabeth Barber. Caroline was taken to hospital, where she told a detective that Rachel was dead and buried next to an old pet of hers on her dad's farm in Kilmore. With the help of her father, detectives found Rachel's buried body, the makeshift garrote cord still wrapped around her neck. With the admission of her crimes, Caroline was taken into custody to await trial for murder. As the community and the Barber family was reeling from the shock of Rachel's murder, evidence emerged of Caroline's twisted plans. In her journals were written entries talking of lacing pizza with drowsy powder to give to Rachel on the day of her murder. Another entry laid out the plan for the murder, reading, "On the way to dance school, say that she can't tell anyone that she's meeting me, as I'm not allowed to give the study results to anyone. Ethics, highly confidential. Not even your boyfriend parents. Drug Rachel, toxic over mouth. Put body into army bags and disfigure and dump somewhere way out. No car." Another entry read, "Check farm, including bag. Tuesday arrange bank loan. Moving van, night to disguise hair. Thoroughly clean house and steam clean carpet." This entry was clearly her planning out how to get away with murder. It was reported that after murdering Rachel, Caroline left her lifeless body in her wardrobe and went to work. Appearing pale and sick, she was driven back home. And on the next day, when she called in sick, she wrapped Rachel's body in 2 rugs, stuffed it into an army bag, and hired a taxi to help her move a statue to her father's farm property. There, she buried Rachel in the family pet cemetery amid a clutch of trees near a dam. Alongside the journals found in Caroline's apartments were 2 applications, one for a birth certificate in Rachel Barber's name and another for a $10,000 bank loan, which she applied for as the Barber family were looking for their missing daughter. Investigators believe that all of this was evidence of Caroline's intention to most likely run off and live under Rachel's identity elsewhere. More evidence eventually came to light suggesting Caroline had planned to take on Rachel's persona and flee Victoria using the alias Jem Southall, a character she described in her writings as a 16-year-old total revhead. Make of this what you will. Southall was Rachel's mother, Elizabeth Barber's maiden surname. Bizarrely, however, even after confessing to the police, Caroline decided to fight the murder charge. Then, at the 11th hour, she pleaded guilty, denying Rachel's loved ones a trial and the answers they so desperately desired.
I have seen a photo of that noose. I know it could have been let go right at the very end when she said Rachel was pleading, please, please don't. Maybe in prison this is where she'll get the special help that she needs, but it doesn't take away the tragedy that she's destroyed a beautiful life.
October 2000, Caroline pleaded guilty to murder. In sentencing the then 21-year-old Caroline to 20 years jail with a minimum term of 14 and a half years, Justice Vincent stated, "You were motivated by envy of Rachel's beauty and her personality, and above all, I am satisfied, because you believed that she would be likely to have a happy and successful life of a kind that you anticipated you would never experience. What has emerged from all of the material, in my opinion, is that you suffer from a deeply entrenched personality disorder which contributed to your conduct, and at this stage at least, you represent a real danger to any who may become the unfortunate subject of your fixation. What is it about a person that drives them from the point of self-loathing to self-delusion? This is one question I kept asking myself throughout my entire research and as I was writing the script. How? When? Why? Feeling awkward in one's skin, even uncomfortable, is a normal teen experience. The discomfort is an unease with the realization that how we are perceived must be reconciled with who we want to be. To a degree, it is a healthy, if not necessary, struggle, one which most teens learn to deal with and grow out of. Where did Caroline go astray? How does one get to the point of painting a self-portrait that is completely black and then hang it up? Yep, she did this. Lord only knows how her obsession must have become full-blown during her time babysitting for the Barber family. Caroline's writings revealed how she had profiled Rachel as a white picket fence, a symbol of perfect purity, while she, a black void. At what point did Caroline decide she wasn't just envious but wanted to be Rachel? Who knows? Her journal does provide some perspective. In one entry, she called herself an alien with horrible things bottled up inside. During her Supreme Court plea hearing, while she sobbed in the dock, her lawyer, Colin Lovett, read aloud her anguished writings of self-loathing and hatred. I feel like a troubled and tortured lost soul who has been thrown into a world of angels. In a report for the defense, forensic psychiatrist Justin Barry Walsh explained that Caroline selected a victim whose qualities she believed were sadly lacking within herself, stating, "It is possible that she thought she could somehow magically reinvent herself in the image of the victim." And that seems to be the case. In her mind, somehow, Caroline rationalized that by murdering Rachel, she indeed could magically inhabit the image of the victim. But yet again, the question remains, how did she rationalize it? Or maybe I am over-psychoanalyzing this. Perhaps it was just pure jealousy that led her to murder Rachel, and her trying to steal Rachel's identity after death was malice and one last spit at Rachel's memory. According to prosecutor Jeremy Rapke, it does seem likely that the motive is to be found, if at all, in the accused's obsession and her jealousy of Rachel's attractiveness, popularity, and success, and perhaps a desire on the part of the accused to emulate the success of a younger person with whom she had become infatuated. Whatever the case, it was only after the murder that Caroline was diagnosed with a personality disorder. After her sentencing in November 2000, the outwardly reformed Caroline became eligible for parole on August 10, 2013, but her release was delayed following a public outcry by Rachel's parents to keep her behind bars.
The parents of a teenage dancer who was strangled by a family friend 13 years ago have expressed alarm about her murderer's possible release from prison. Rachel Barber's parents warn that Caroline Reed Robertson is a manipulator who may try to trick the parole board.
Eventually, the Adult Parole Board of Australia granted her application in October 2014, setting down core conditions of her parole: that she must not break any law, must obey reporting conditions, and must notify her parole officer of any change of address 2 days before any move. And so she was released on parole in 2015. It is reported that she never expressed remorse for her crimes. In fact, she seemingly spent her time behind bars drastically changing her physical appearance to look more like her victim. So much so that her transformation shocked Rachel's parents, who had not seen Robertson since she was sentenced in November 2000. The difference was so stark that Rachel's mother Elizabeth noticed it immediately the first time she saw Caroline again, stating, "There's a Rachel likeness there." The eyes.
I've got to go now. Sorry, goodbye. Dad, come here.
Rest in peace, Rachel.